Hi, Julie.
Hello, my friend.
I am excited and curious to hear all about the poet that found you this week.
Well, I have a lot to share, so I'm really glad that we are taking this time to just play and talk and have the kind of conversations that kind of stir the heart and cause the deeper thinking, the contemplation. Um, we both as Americans are going through, you know, so much, including what we're sharing with the rest of the world in what's happening with COVID-19. I happen to live in a state in the United States that is on the top of the COVID-19 numbers list every single day and has been for a couple weeks now. Texas is not that far behind. Um, and we've got a lot of shutdowns happening. We are talking about things like getting our kids back in school in August. Kids start school middle of August here in Arizona.
Here as
And
well.
the reality is that's probably not going to happen, or that shouldn't happen. And we have leadership in our federal government that seems to think that needs to happen. And if it doesn't, there should be a punishing consequence. So we've got that kind of conflict. On top of the fact that people are getting sick, people are dying. There's a lot of there's a lot of rhetoric happening for from people who are pro-mask or anti-mask and everything in between. Um, and that's like the smallest part of what's going on. But so we've got this happening, which is a very real thing, and it's happening everywhere in the world.
Correct.
And the layer that has really been sort of in my heart, I would say, for the last month is really wanting to understand what Black citizens in this country are trying to educate white America about their experience. And so that sort of has sent me on a discovery search of really wanting to watch some of the YouTube videos and participate in some of the Zoom presentations and read some of the commentary that people are being, what I would say, very generous of spirit in still wanting to try to explain, try to show the way. And while there is often rage and pain, and there's still a generosity of spirit. And I'm very intrigued by that. Um, but it really set me on, how long has Black Lives Matter kind of been going on? And it's about a 7-year program. I don't know if you were aware of that. So, about 7 years ago, um, Trayvon Martin, a young 18-year-old Black man, was killed by a man in the community, not somebody he knew. I just forgot his name, George Zimmerman.
Zimmerman.
And it was this like innocent boy walking with his hoodie, and somebody decides he looked dangerous.
He was walking with his hoodie, eating some Skittles.
Yeah, he was up to no good. And this man is acquitted, and he kills this young man. So in the Black community, that's not so unique. But for us starting to kind of hear this, those of us who are from a white background, it was shocking. It was, how could that, wait, how can this be? This isn't right. But it fairly quickly probably lost steam in the media, because there's like the next thing in the news cycle sort of comes on board. And if it doesn't affect you personally, you don't tend to, you don't tend to get as charged by it for any period of time, because you're on to the next thing. And so I just sort of was thinking about that whole situation and what that must feel like if you're part of a Black community and this is not news to you in a way. This is the thing you live with, that fear, that sort of like, it's always kind of in the background. The tape is always kind of there telling you you have to be more careful.
Right.
You can't trust a police officer is there as a public servant on your behalf. All of that sort of what really got me thinking. And then, we're like a year after what happened to Trayvon. We're in Ferguson, Missouri, and another young boy, 17, is murdered by a white police officer. And when you go back and kind of like I wanted to go back, like, what was it that he supposedly did? What created all that? He was accused of stealing a box of cigars, like something very, accused of it. And so here we go. We're starting to recognize, and that set off a riot in the city. Trayvon Martin was like a major sit-in, I would say, in Florida. And what is white America upset about? They're upset about the destruction and the violence of the charge of anger that is unleashed because of it. So again, that sort of, what is it that makes that more potent than the fact that these young men are murdered? They're killed for something that a white boy of that same age, it would have been annoying, maybe. It would have been, what are you doing out and about? That you're up to no good. Get yourself home. Like, that contrast is just very strong right now. And of course, as I started looking up names, it was name after name after name, before we get to the most recent outbreak that has truly, I think, brought to the place it needs to be from white America as well as our Black American citizens, that enough is enough. And it's really understanding George Floyd's, death, Eric Garner's death, Breonna Taylor's death. Those are the kind of the three strongest names right now that are people who this violence, this fear, this needs so much healing work to happen. And that's like, let's take 400 plus years and things that happened on behalf of our ancestors and things that have been dismissed, too difficult to deal with, too painful to deal with. We'll deal with that later. We have more important issues first. And what I recognize is that whole idea of the squeaky wheel, getting the grease, sort of like this is long overdue. And now the bill has come due. And all those past due notices mean nothing, because right now the rubber meets the road. What kind of nation are we going to be? So all of that has been like swirling in my world as I've been really thinking about, what is my contribution? What is my, right now I'm not getting out and doing any kind of marching, any kind of public protest, because of health, because of being concerned about that. And so my way of getting involved is participating in the discussions that I can find online, and really sort of, when an ask is made by an organization or by an individual, deciding if that's something I feel like I can get behind and participate in. So that's what I'm doing right now in that realm. But that even feels weak. And that sort of set me on more discovery, thinking about where else in the world is this sort of dissent happening between citizens? Where else in the world is the fear of the other sort of been an ongoing thread that has moved through culture?
So, where did this question take you, Julie?
So this took me to the Troubles, as it is called,
Uh-huh.
in Ireland.
Yes.
And I was curious to know, what was happening in that region of the world, and how did they actually finally get to that Good Friday agreement, that peace agreement,
Right.
finally was birthed. And I mean, this is not nearly as long as what's been happening with the race issue within our country, but it's something to look to because they actually did get to a peace agreement.
Right.
Now, is it perfect? I don't know enough people from that region of the world, but I'm sure curious to know a little bit more and dig deeper. But what I found was that, in that region of the world, there were numerous riots. There was mass violence. There was so much destruction and protest. And the creation of these like no-go zones, and if you got caught there, it was dangerous. It was a horrifying time. And 1998, we finally, after 50 plus years, maybe 60 years, reached some sort of a peace agreement. And so learning about that led me to the poet that I am going to share with you today.
Oh.
And he comes from the Irish Catholic southern part of Ireland,
Mm-hmm.
and a very Irish Catholic traditional sort of family. So Irish Catholic that in his family, saying the rosary in Irish every night as a family was just sort of like before you brushed your teeth and went to bed. That sort of Catholic. And so this is a young man who ends up studying conflict resolution as a student, and
Mm-hmm.
he makes his way to Africa, and he makes his way to the Middle East and does work for several years in conflict resolution before he finds his way back to his home country, and he ends up in the north of Ireland, which not everybody understands, but the north of Ireland is British, and the rest of the country is Ireland, is its own country. And so he ends up in Northern Ireland, and he ends up working with this organization where he is working with reconciliation and helping people who are coming together from you can have a peace agreement. It doesn't mean you still have peace.
Right.
So he is working now with people to really have the conversations that are sort of those painful, let's sit down here at the kitchen table and I'll tell you what I know about you and you tell me where I've got it right. Those kinds of conversations. And more importantly, you tell me where I got it wrong. So I was really intrigued by just that work that he has been about in reconciliation and what that looks like and how painful it is. And he shares a story about a young girl who says to him, very, very sort of goes her own mind, very, the kind of kid that if they get bored, they're going to find their way to like something to, fill up the interest level, which is usually separate from what's happening in class, for example. And so he talks about this girl who says to him, so there is a God. And this God, has made us all of us, all human beings in his image. And he supposedly loves us, right? And he's like, where are you going with this? And she said, why do the Protestants hate us? And why do they hate God?
Mm-hmm.
And so it led him to, oh, wow, still. And this is in like 2014?
Thank
Not
you
that
for
long
the
ago.
context. Yes.
So like, this is not that long ago. And he's realizing, oh, this whole idea of what we learn in the home, what we learn in our personal lives is what we take out into our public lives. And there can be so much lost in translation. There can be so much of what we bring in thinking we know, but we don't know. We know what we know, and we miss so much. And he says that there's something about being in the shelter of home, but also the shadow of home that we bring into those kind of conversations. And I just was really interested in how do we take this work and figure out how to have those difficult conversations.
Well, and I love these two questions. Tell me what I got right and tell me what I got wrong.
And being willing to really stay with the discomfort is where you have an opportunity for your heart to maybe like have a little bit of a, oh, you are more like me.
Mm-hmm.
You see things from a lens that's similar to me. Maybe I can be your friend. It does create sometimes just that little bit of space is all that's needed to be able to take it to the next level. And he says something that I just really like, it just really hit me. He said that belonging creates us and it undoes us.
Mm.
And
Belonging creates us.
And it undoes us. Yeah. He said that because he is out, he has some beautiful TED Talks. I haven't even told you his name yet. But anyway, because he's a presenter, he said that people will often come up to him and say, that thing you said, and dot, 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 fill it in, whatever it is. And often he'll say, no, tell me what it is I said. And he's like, it was never even close to what I said. But that's that part of that people internalize, and meanings are in people, not necessarily in the words that were said. And because as human beings, we are meaning meaning makers. We're always trying to understand and make meaning of experiences and what was said and what that really means and all of that. It's a really good question of when somebody says that thing you said, make them tell you what that thing was that
Yeah.
you said, so that you really can understand from their paradigm what they got out of what you said.
Yes.
A very interesting technique of listening, of deep listening. So I love that about his work. So this is a beautiful poet, theologian, and a mediator. So he does really beautiful work in the world, and his name is Padraig O Tuama. Have you heard of him?
And you can
Did you
see
write?
I wrote his name down. I am a huge fan of his.
Oh,
His
beautiful.
his story and his message and how he has lived this. This isn't just something he's thought about. He lives this and he does this work. Yes. Yes. So, first, I
I
need
just
you.
really can't wait to share this poem with you.
Okay, so before I've been waiting for you to say his name. I could hear him in how you were talking. So let me just give a strike as we lead into this because you have oh my gosh, you have introduced this poem and I feel like I need to give some sound as we prepare. Julie, give name to this poem that found you this week.
The poem is entitled "The Pedagogy of Conflict."
Mm.
When I was a child, I learned to count to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But these days, I've been counting lives. So I count one life, one life, one life, one life, one life. Because each time is the first time that that life has been taken. The legitimate target has 16 letters and one long, abominable space between 2 dehumanizing words.
The first time that this life has been taken. Julie, this transition between counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to one life, one life, one life. One life does not get lost when we say one life, when we count one life, one life.
Yeah, it's a very simple, poignant coming together of words to do a snapshot in time. He wrote this, of course, in relation to the lives lost in bloody conflict within his country, within, the island of Ireland. But this fits everywhere.
Hmm.
Conflict is taking lives that it is not there, they are not theirs to take. That it's, this unnecessary violence, this discord, this arrogant, irreverent, unholy thing that some human beings are perpetuating. And we have to decide what kind of what kind of a humanity do we want to leave as our legacy?
And we can't get used to it.
No. And it's
It
got to be one life,
has to be
one life, one life.
and
Yeah.
saying
The call.
one life and saying the name, we just can't get used to it and allow one to just roll into another and roll into another until we stop counting.
Mhm.
Can you read the last line again, Julie?
Mhm. Legitimate target has 16 letters and one long abominable space between two dehumanizing words. Legitimate target.
Legitimate target.
What is a legitimate target? Is a human being ever a legitimate target?
Legitimate target. Right.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm. That is very powerful. And it brings me right back to ground, where I want to be in this time of remembering and holding remembrance, um, of what matters during this time.
Yeah. So in Northern Ireland, in kind of the Belfast area, there is a place, a community called Corrymeela. And Corrymeela sort of comes out of, it's an actual place, kind of a region, a town area. But during World War II, there was a man named Ray Davy who provided, I guess, spiritual teaching as well as physical activity through, I want to say, like a YMCA, YWCA, some sort of organization like that. Um, and it was intended to support the troops during World War II. Well, he was captured during the conflict, the war, and was taken into Germany, someplace, I want to say Dresden, and was in a camp for part of his time during World War II. And after all that was over, he came back to Ireland and recognized what epic waste war and the destruction of life and the destruction of villages and towns and cities and all, like, just what a waste that was. And he sort of dedicated his life to setting up, I guess what you would call is like a peace, like some sort of peace program that he brought back to Ireland and was counseling the world, like, how do we not repeat this? How do we learn from this kind of sort of, and so this was imagine like the 1960s when conflict within Ireland is really hitting up between, I mean, it had always been there, but that's when the violence, the troubles, as they really were starting to heat up. And so, like, we're talking 30 some years of these kind of this conflict happening between in his country. And he bought a place like a castle of some called Valley Castle in this region, and he started this program of Corrymeela is what they ended up naming this kind of school, this institution, this place of learning. And it can be, I guess, the Corrymeela, the Irish word converted to English would be called Hill of Harmony, or the Hill of the Honeysuckle is another another term. And Corrymeela became a movement of a place where people who were looking for inspirational teaching to come to, and it was like a place to pollinate and cross-pollinate ideas around peace and community and what it means to listen to the other, where you don't have to agree, but you do need to show respect and reverence that they have a right to their opinion, and what's the path forward. Find a path forward. What could that look like? If I give a little bit, if you give a little bit, what could that look like? And so Corrymeela has now, it is the place that Padraig ends up working for several years in reconciliation work and all that sort of thing. And, before everything happened with COVID, they were welcoming upwards of 8,000 people a year to Corrymeela from all over the world for reconciliation work and workshops and trainings and doing really important work. And so I'm just intrigued by wanting to know more about that work, how to get involved, how to figure out what's already maybe been created and could be brought here on some level. What that could look like is really kind of swirling around me right now. And I mean, this is the longest peace reconciliation place of work, like 50 plus years that we know about. So that's a really, that's a powerful legacy to be part of. So there's hope in this dark time in American culture where the reckoning and the rumble is here. And as a nation, it's important to decide, what is it we want to teach our children? How do we teach forgiveness if we can't practice forgiveness?
Well, Julie, I so appreciate you asking the question of where else in the world have they or are they experiencing this sort of troubles, and how have they found a path forward? Yeah, that feels powerful, but also hopeful.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there's so much more for me to learn. I just stuck my toe in the water and found what I found, which led me to Padraig's work. And he also has a regular program on Being, which is a beautiful website where they do a deep dive into a poem and he leads the discussion about that. And so I have not watched any of those yet because I have not had time, but I'm excited to know.
Yeah, I think it's Saturday mornings.
Oh, nice.
Saturday,
So I'm
yeah.
very excited to learn more.
And there's a lovely, if anybody wants to know more about him and his work, there is a fabulous interview on Being with Krista Tippett that she does with him. I think he's been on her show many, many times. But if anybody wants to know more about his reconciliation work, there's a lovely interview with that, and we'll put some links to the interview and his poetry deep dive on Being as well. Oh, Julie, thank you for asking the beautiful and difficult questions this week.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's something I'm really wanting to put my focus and some energy and some support and some time on. And so I will, yeah.
Yeah, I can feel this. This comes from your heart center. Absolutely. Yeah.
And so just another thing that I found kind of amusing, this afternoon I got a text message from a friend of mine that said, hey, today is Pema Chodron's birthday.
Hmm.
And I always think of you when I hear, any of Pema Chodron's quotes, and, because, for me, Pema Chodron is that, first of all, she is a American Buddhist nun
Yep.
who is a prolific writer and public speaker. And I just found her book, When Things Fall Apart, kind of, again, found me. This book found me in those early days when I was divorcing my husband. And I would get the 4:44 a.m. wake up call with my head just like spinning, spinning, spinning. And I kept her book on my bedside table, When Things Fall Apart. And I would just like open it, grab it, and open it, thinking, there's some wisdom here for me. I'm gonna like get through this. She's got the secret sauce. I know it, and so I found a quote by her that I was like, well, there are no mistakes. First of all, her birthday isn't today, it's July 14th, but I didn't want to correct her because this was perfect that it landed, because here's the quote from Pema Chodron and how it fits into what we're talking about today. The only reason we don't open our hearts and minds to other people is that they trigger confusion in us and we don't feel brave enough or sane enough to deal with. To the degree that we look clearly and compassionately at ourselves, we feel confident and fearless about looking into someone else's eyes. So, full circle, of wisdom out there for us.
I have to tell you, I just had this conversation with a friend of mine the other day, and we were talking about confusion and how when something or someone activates confusion in us, we do one of two things. We either move away from it because the confusion is uncomfortable, or we lean in and say, something about this is confusing to me, and it creates conversation. So using confusion as a cue, there's something for me to learn, to know, to understand, and not turn away from that. Ah,
Yeah.
lovely, Julie. Lovely. Thank you for, again, asking these questions and really putting it out there, because it found you from the other side of the world. It came at you strong and with such a hopeful message.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I maybe even some personal messages about where your heart is leading you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my friend, thank you so much.
Well, as always, these are the conversations I want to be having with people about things that are real and how do we brave new world that's ahead
Yeah.
and carve it out of love and kindness and peace.
Yeah. And for me, it feels sometimes I can feel overwhelmed um, with the magnitude. And so having the conversations is a place to start. Begin the conversations with one person and one person and one person.
Mhm.
Right.
And I like that what you said about confusion can be a great place to get to more. And
Mhm.
even saying, tell me more about that. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Or to say, um, I'm feeling confused about something that you said. Can we talk about it? Can I ask you questions about it?
Mhm.
Hmm. Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Hmm.
Mm. All right. Until next time,
All right. Until next time, stay well.
you as well. Have a great week.
All right. You too.